So now I'd like to introduce today's program, being March 19th. We're welcoming Tess Kunik to our interface group to present a private screening of the film LIV, which is a fearless storytelling to turn the tide of youth suicide. And I want to tell you that Tess and her family grew up in Boulder, but she now is streaming, coming to us from Philadelphia, where she lives now. She has a BFA from the University of Arts in Philadelphia, where she graduated in 2013. And from 2015 to 2020, she served as teaching artist, designer, and stage manager for a nonprofit theater education organization, and later brought theater programming to schools in the greater Philadelphia area as their education and outreach manager. As I said, she's here with the film, and she serves as the Chief Impact Officer for the LIV project. I'm sure she's going to be telling us more about that. And she's passionate about collaboration and storytelling and its power to educate, inspire, and start conversations. So without further ado, let's turn it over to Tess. And welcome for having this program and hosting this discussion. So I'll stop the screen share and bring you on, Tess. There you are.
Great. Thank you so much, Barry, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm so honored to share with Interface and to have learned about Interface and the amazing programming that it provides for the community. Like Barry said, I was born and raised in Colorado. Have always considered and will always consider Colorado, especially Boulder, my home. I am here to share LIV today. LIV is my little sister, Olivia, and we lost Olivia to suicide in 2019. She was 19 years old, and she was a student up at the University of Northern Colorado. She had battled for much of her life with depression and anxiety, and specifically when she was away at school. So before we start the film, I'd love to give a little background on how we came to create this film. For LIV's service, we had the wonderful help of our dear friend, Paula. And Paula runs a nonprofit in Boulder called There With Care. You may know There With Care. It's a fantastic organization that serves families with critically ill children. And my grandmother was There With Care's first volunteer. So my family has volunteered with the organization for many years, and when LIV passed, Paula helped us with LIV's service. And she helped us make it a celebration of her life, as well as a moment to be very transparent that she did die by suicide. We wanted to be transparent and upfront about that fact from the get-go, because there is so much shame and stigma around it. And we wanted to provide a space for the many young people specifically to process together and be in that truth together. And for LIV service, my mom and I put together about 20 minutes of LIV footage from when she was very young up until she was 19. And Paula saw how this footage really resonated with the many young people who were there. And in addition to running There With Care, Paula is also a film producer. And she has produced several of the Harry Potter films and a lot of family films. And in the past couple of years, she's been working on documentaries. And she had just finished Quincy, the documentary about Quincy Jones. And the day after LIV service, my mom and I went to her house and brought her some things to say thank you for creating such a beautiful memorial for LIV. And she said, if you ever want help telling LIV's story, let me know. I'm here to help you. And my mom and I simultaneously said, yes, we want to tell this story. And Paula said, okay, great, you know, we'll let you grieve, take as much time as you need. And we said, no, we want to do it right now. We want to talk about it right now because we're losing too many people. We don't want other young people to think suicide is an option for them. And we don't want other families to feel what we feel every day now without LIV. And so we started creating this film. Storytelling for me has always been a form of communication. It has been my favorite form of learning. It's been my favorite form of connection. And so it just felt right to tell this story. And so we partnered with Paula, and she gathered her team from Quincy, and we started building this film, which is really a love letter from myself to my sister. And we also partnered with some therapists in Boulder, as well as the team at Children's Hospital Colorado and their Pediatric Mental Health Institute, because our motto from day one was to do no harm. We know there's a lot of media out there that glorifies suicide. We did not want to be that. We wanted to be impactful, but also safe. And so we're really grateful for their guidance in helping us do that. We shared the film I guess, just over a year ago at the Boulder International Film Festival, March 8th last year. And the plan was to tour Colorado with the film, because the youth suicide rates in Colorado specifically are very high. And then COVID happened, and here we all are on Zoom. And we have not let Zoom prevent us from sharing the story, and have continued to share this whole time. So I'm going to share the film now with you. The film is 40 minutes long. Afterward, I will give a brief presentation about the impact it's had. I will share a video from Susan Casso, a licensed therapist in Boulder, who's been an advisor on the film. And my mom will also be joining us for when we open it up for any questions, if you have any specifically for her as a mom. So without further ado, I am going to now share my screen. And you are welcome to leave your cameras on, turn them off, whatever you're most comfortable with. And we will get going. I know it's a lot to watch, so I encourage you all to take care of yourselves and your hearts and do whatever it is you need to do. I want to remind everyone that if you or someone you know is having thoughts of suicide, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline is always available 24 hours a day, as well as the crisis text line, also 24 hours a day. I'm putting both into the chat just so everyone knows that they're there. These conversations are never easy to start because suicide is a scary topic and no one wants to talk about it. And yet it is the second leading cause of death for youth ages 10 to 24. And I believe now it is the leading cause of death for youth in Colorado. I have friends who to this day have not acknowledged Liv's death. I got married in December, and I couldn't help but notice how many more people reached out to me and congratulated me on my wedding than those who reached out when Liv died. I can see the cringe in people's body language when I tell them my sister died by suicide. And it's very painful. And I imagine that the fear people have in talking about my sister's death is just a fraction of the isolation that people feel when they're suicidal and know that others are too afraid to talk about it with them. We have to stop being afraid to have these conversations. I want to share a video now before we continue our presentation and conversation. And this is a video of Susan Casso, who is a licensed therapist in Boulder and an advisor on the film. And this is her message to audience members after they watch.
Hi, my name's Susan Casso. I'm a licensed professional counselor here in Colorado. First of all, I want to thank you for watching Live today. This film is so very important, and I'm so happy that you took the time to watch. I've been so fortunate to be part of the process of the making of the film Live. Back in April of 2019, I had a few calls with the director, Alan Hicks, and the producer, Paula Passman-Dupre, around how to tell Liv's story in the safest way possible. A few weeks later, I found myself watching the first cut of the film, and my initial thought was how this film was going to change lives. And that is what we are seeing. We are seeing individuals who struggle with thoughts of suicide, looking at suicide differently, seeing that suicide isn't an option to end their pain. And that is just so amazing. And I am so grateful to Tess and Honey for making this film. I've been in practice for over 17 years, and working with teens and young adults, and I see individuals like Liv in my office weekly. I'm comfortable asking the questions that family and friends aren't comfortable asking. I ask, are you depressed? Are you anxious? Are you having thoughts of self-harm? Are you having thoughts of not wanting to wake up? Are you having thoughts of suicide? And my asking brings about relief for them. I see it in their faces immediately. When I ask, it's almost as I'm giving them permission to share what's going on for them. It's as if I'm opening a door and letting them know it's okay to walk in the door, and that I'm going to walk in the door with them, and that they're not alone. And I'm going to sit in there with them and comfort them and listen to them and provide some comfort. And in my opinion, we could all open the door for our loved ones. We can all be there for somebody. We can all provide an empathetic ear. When we sense something's wrong with someone, there most likely is. And when we're afraid to ask, when we're afraid to talk with them about it, we're actually telling them that what they're dealing with is so scary that we're even too afraid to talk about it. And we all need to start asking our loved ones. We all need to start asking. Right now, more than ever, in the middle of a pandemic, the CDC put out a report in August saying that 75% of individuals ages 18 to 24 are reporting at least one mental or behavior health symptom. And of that 75%, 24% are reporting severe thoughts of suicide. So again, now more than ever, we really need to start talking with each other about our mental health. I'm sure you've all seen the commercials around the pandemic. It says we're all in this together. Well, that messaging is so very smart because it provides comfort. Nobody wants to sit in a difficult situation by themselves. Nobody wants to deal with something super difficult and painful on their own. Our mental health and thoughts of suicide are no different. We all need to start talking with each other more. Thank you.
So I like to share that because I think it's such an important message. And I spent so much of my life in fear that Liv would end hers. And I asked her if she was safe all the time, but I admittedly was often afraid to use the word suicide. And I was always afraid to hear what her response would be. And she knew me so well that she knew I was afraid. And I think that prevented her from being 100% honest with me, especially towards the end of her life. You know, before she died, I don't ever remember asking any of my friends if they were having thoughts of suicide or self-harm, if I noticed that they were not doing well. And no one ever asked me. And now if I sense someone in my life is struggling, I will ask them. And it gets easier every time. And that fear is sometimes still there, but my fear is nothing compared to the relief that they feel in having someone to share that with. And So that is what we are focusing on in sharing this film, is having these conversations fearlessly, because fear is holding us back and fear is fueling the issue, and we're losing way too many people, and especially way too many young people. We made this film because we didn't want others to think suicide had to be an option for them. And Susan shared a little in her video about this, but I wanted to share some of the impact that we have seen, just a couple of stories for you. Last year, after seeing the film, a mother asked her middle school age daughter if she had ever had thoughts of suicide. And she found out that her daughter did, in fact, have suicidal thoughts that Christmas prior, and her mom had no idea. A 19-year-old girl who experienced depression and suicidal thoughts saw the film and said, "I'm not better, my depression's not gone, but I don't want to end my life anymore. Suicide is not an option for me anymore." We had a grandfather after a screening say that he was going to reach out to his 16-year-old grandson because he knew he was struggling, especially in the midst of this pandemic. We shared the film with a class at CU, and before we started the discussion, a young man said, "Excuse me, I just need to go text a bunch of my friends and family and just tell them I love them and check on them." And I was able to share the film with some of my theater students and their families. And I wanted to read to you something that one of the fathers said to me after the event. He said, "Thank you so much for sharing Liv's story with us. It was profoundly impactful on our entire family. The girls were too upset to watch the Q&A after the film, and I was a bit disappointed as I thought it would be an opportunity to learn as a family. However, the conversation wrapped up. I took the opportunity to speak with my elder daughter about what I had learned. She's 13 and she is a more vulnerable child and is at a particularly vulnerable time in her life. What transpired was one of the most open, honest, and rewarding conversations I've ever had with her. She is a closed book much of the time, and she gives you a fleeting glimpse of what exists under the surface. To be allowed into her world, even if just for an evening, was so wonderful, and I owe it to you and your family's willingness to be brave and honest." And that is just a handful of some of the things that we are seeing and hearing, because this film does ignite fearlessness to talk in those who watch. And these conversations are so necessary to connecting us during, especially right now when we are feeling so isolated and alone, and all of us are dealing with the same crisis. A question that often gets asked in these panels and discussions is, is there anything you would have done differently in preparing Liv for school? And my mom, answers that question and says, we let Liv know about all of the, how to stay safe in social situations and such, but we wish we had told her to put the suicide prevention lifeline number in her phone. And as well, we wish we had encouraged her to establish safe connections at school. Because when she was home, when she was in high school, she had such a huge support system, such a network. She could go to anyone. She could text her therapist. She could go to her choir teacher. And when she was up at school, she didn't have that. And she just wanted to be, quote unquote, normal, have the normal college experience, didn't want to share what was going on inside for her. And I think that's really important in preparing our young people for the step from high school into beyond, is, finding people who are safe to talk to. Like Liv, I've always been very emotional and very sensitive. And before she died, I always thought that those were character flaws or weaknesses. But since having shared her story and showing my raw and uncensored grief, I found that sensitivity and vulnerability are actually superpowers. And they have given me the power to open up this conversation. Because when we share our pain with others, it's less heavy and more manageable because we can carry it together. And every time we share this film, someone shares their experience, either their own battle with mental health, a loved one's battle, losing someone to suicide. Um, and this year has been extremely isolating for most of us. But through this film, we've been able to connect with dozens of strangers in profound ways because of sharing our vulnerabilities and being open. And I think that connection is so important because it reminds us that we're not alone. And I wish we could treat mental health like we treat physical health. When I speak to high school and college students, I often ask them, if someone you know is suicidal, what do you do? Or if you yourself are suicidal, what do you do? And I can't tell you how many kids have said, I wouldn't know what to do. And I said, were you taught about anything in school? And the majority say, you know, there was a short unit in our health class, but that's it. And that makes me so sad. You know, suicide prevention and mental health awareness should be woven into every subject. You know, all schools teach Shakespeare. You know, most schools teach Romeo and Juliet at some point. That's an awesome opportunity to have conversation and training about teen suicide prevention. Instead of just simply decoding the iambic pentameter of Shakespeare's words, but really digging into a very real problem that we experience. And I think there are moments like that throughout our culture, throughout curriculum and education, where suicide prevention training and awareness can be woven in. But I think we're so afraid to talk about it that we just don't address it. I hear a lot of people say, I don't ask because if they say they are suicidal, I don't know what to do. Or I don't ask because I'm not a mental health professional, so it's not my job. And while I understand those sentiments, it is all of our jobs to reach out and to ask those hard questions. And if we're not mental health professionals, we can be a connector for someone. We can direct them to the lifeline. We can stay on the phone with them. We can connect them with a trusted adult. We can all be that person for someone. And if we normalize reaching out more, I think it might normalize, if we normalize reaching in to someone, I think it might normalize and encourage people to reach out more. Because when I talk about fearless communication, it goes two ways, right? I'm saying we have to be fearless in reaching out and asking those hard questions, but we also need to be fearless if we are the ones struggling to reach out. Because I know for Liv, that was very hard, reaching out. And we all deserve to feel like we can reach out to someone if we are needing help. I want to, before we open up for questions, I want to talk about the power of creativity and how that is also a superpower. It was Liv's way of coping. You know, my mother and I are both artists. It's how we cope and connect. And that is what we are doing with the LIV project. We are a group of creatives who are determined to make tools that spark these fearless conversations. And so I believe that creativity breeds collaboration, and collaboration is connection, which is what we're talking about, what we need. So this film is the first tool of the LIV project. We are currently at this moment adding another act to the film. So what you saw today is the 40-minute short version, and what we're working on is adding conversations that we have been having this past year to support audiences after. So I am having conversations with mental health professionals, with students, with Liv's friends, with strangers who have seen the film and are encouraged to reach out, and just modeling these fearless conversations. And having, you know, folks who have attempted suicide as well, and what they have learned and how they have continued to cope and find hope. And so we're really excited to be continuing this film, so that we can share it with more people, and it can be, it can have these conversations that are so necessary, and have the education that it seems is missing in a lot of places. The film is also going to include a game that we have created this past year. And the game is called The Game That Goes There. And it is, it has these awesome monsters that kids really love and resonate with. And this game was created in partnership with an organization called Humanaut. They're a creative agency, and it's been vetted by Children's Hospital and Susan for ages 13 and up. And it was also helped created with the guidance of our youth advisory board at the LIV project. Something that's very important to me is having the younger generation's voice be at the forefront of this. And so they helped create this game, helped share, you know, what would work for them, what they might not, you know, connect with. And so they really helped with the rules. There are 3 different levels to the game. There is a first level prompt card called Kinda Going There. So those are more easy questions. And then we have Almost Going There, which is kind of the middle road. And then we've got We're Going There. And the levels were created by the youth advisors, because when we originally presented the idea to them, it was just one level, and they said, no one's going to go there immediately. We want to have levels. And they also shared with us that, you know, if we don't want to go there, that needs to be a rule two, so that there's agency. So the main rules of the game are: be honest, don't be a jerk, and you only have to go there if you want to. And this game is doing the same thing that the film is. We are finding people saying, wow, I found this thing out about my friend I've known for 10 years that I had no idea about. Or, you know, I had one friend say, after I played with some of my friends, one of them decided that he was gonna seek out a therapist. And so it is unlocking these conversations in a way that's not scary or clinical, and is really exciting. And I had the opportunity to share it with some of my students ages 13 to 18, and they talked about mental health for an hour before we even opened the box. And then we played the game, and then I had a student write different biographies for each of these monsters, because she was so inspired by the game, by the artwork. And each biography she wrote has a little bit of different mental health struggles within each monster, which is exactly what the monsters are. You know, we all have these scary emotions and heavy thoughts within us. And instead of running away from them, let's talk about them and normalize them and realize that we all have them. So that is our latest tool and project for the LIV project. We are a nonprofit organization, and we have a wonderful fiscal sponsor called Rise Against Suicide in Boulder. Rise Against Suicide serves teens and kids in the Boulder Valley School District, as well as the St. Vrain Valley School District. And they are a fantastic organization and a wonderful resource as well. I would now like to introduce my lovely mom, Honey. She is here. LIV's mom, my mom, the executive director of the LIV project. And I'd love to open it up for any thoughts or comments that anyone may have. You're welcome to raise your hand or put something in the chat. Just wanted to open it up now for folks.
Thank you both so much. What a moving film. And I know everyone who's been on the chat here must be changed by the presentation and your words afterwards. And welcome, Honey.
Thank you, Barry. I appreciate you all having us here today. Thank you so much.
Most welcome. All right, let's turn it over to folks. Who wants to go first? Chris? Have to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you both so very much for turning your pain into something so beautiful. I'm so touched, I'm probably going to cry, but this is so needed. I work with young people. I used to be a teacher in Boulder, and now I'm a therapist in Boulder. And I've been through this with my clients. And I think it just needs to spread as far and wide as it possibly can, because these kids are honest with me, and I know they want to be honest with others. And we could really prevent so many unnecessary deaths this way. So I'm very interested in your project, and I will be in touch in some way again. And I want that game immediately. Also, I want to say, Tess, that you're beautiful. And your sister is so beautiful too. And honey, your love shines through. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you. I also want to acknowledge that this is a lot to process. So if you don't have anything to say, no pressure. Just want to give you all the space to, if you do have something to say or ask. And you can visit us at our website, reach us there at liveproject.org. We are continuing to share the film in this format while we are building the third act. So if you would like to share with any communities or friends and family, please reach out and we'd be happy to schedule something.
Anyone else want to join in? What thoughts or memories or images come to mind while you're watching this film?
Why can't people kill themselves?
What's that?
Why can't people kill themselves?
Well, that's an interesting question. Everyone can do whatever it is that they want to do, but I know that losing someone to suicide is the biggest pain I've ever felt in my life. And I don't want anyone else to go through that. And we have also heard from suicide attempt survivors that they didn't want to die, they just wanted their pain to end. And I think it's important for everyone to know that everything is temporary. Every emotion in crisis is temporary, and that we can get through those big moments together.
I remember working with a few clients at the mental health center many, many decades ago. One gentleman in particular comes to mind who survived a suicide attempt and now has some disabilities because of it, because he used a gun, and having to help him come to terms with post-suicide attempt was very, very provocative, and he was grateful that he was still alive, but now was suffering in a different way.
Yeah, and we've talked to a few suicide attempt survivors, and it is pretty remarkable when they state that, like, immediately after they took the action, they immediately regretted it. And we're so thankful that they lived. So it's been really eye-opening for us talking with survivors.
I'll bet. So we have other therapists here in the chat. We have some parents who are not therapists. I think everyone can relate to the predicament of knowing or not knowing what's going on with another. Even for therapists, we think we understand, we have the deepest intimacy with clients, and yet we still get caught off guard when one of our clients have succeeded, and go back and try to rerun the tape like you guys must have been doing over and over again. What could you have done differently? Were there signs? How come you acted one way and not another? It's provocative to try to do better each time.
Yeah, and we're trying to use this as a learning experience, especially for parents who are sending their kids off to school, in talking about with our kids about the things that Tess said about having a connection up at school, and people they can feel comfortable going to without feeling shame. And obviously having the crisis numbers in their phones as well. What is so painful is that Liv did have all the support down in Niwot, but that night was like a constellation of risk factors. She was alone in her dorm room. She had a lot to drink at a party. And obviously in that like impulsive moment, couldn't handle the pain, whatever painful experience she was feeling in that moment, she just couldn't handle it. And, you know, I want to kind of scream this from the rooftops, especially to kids, you know, especially if you're on psychiatric medication, but also alcohol is dangerous. It's a depressant. And, you know, that this is a cautionary tale. So, yeah, but we're going to live with the rest of our lives not knowing what the final trigger was.
Have either of you, Tess or Honey, come across this standard stock kind of flag that says that if you notice someone giving away their belongings, or they start to feel happy and their mood has shifted out of depression and they look like they're doing better, that's a warning sign. And that could be one of the signals that someone is about to make a suicide attempt. Either of you have any comments about that?
You want me to take that, Tess? Or
Sure, yeah. I think it's just so important to know what those signs are.
Mhm.
And seeing them now, I'm like, oh yeah, I could see how Liv was withdrawing and she was isolating and this, that, and the third. But you know, now I'm like, okay, if I see these things, let me say something. I think they're important to know.
My dad always said, be your own best friend. And that might sound self-isolating, but I completely agree with my dad. The other day, I'm in this Zoom group of World Affairs discussion group, and this 93-year-old woman is really powerful individual in the group. And one day I came on and it was only for a couple minutes because that's all I had, and we meet every day, so it's fine. And she had this very strange sound to her voice. It was very distorted. And she said something about being on steroids. And she was always in a hurry when she was leaving because they have dinner. She's at the academy on the hill, and she'll just leave quickly, which she did. But and that's something I'm not that good at. I kind of take longer. But the next day she was dead. And when I brought it up with this group, I was so stigmatized for like suggesting that there was anything that abnormal going on. I called the academy, and the person I know there, I alerted to this fact that her voice was so distorted and she'd been on steroids. And I didn't know that. And I tried to ask her, but she was too quick getting off. What are you on steroids for? Or to ask her more about that. But she was quick getting off. And finally, a week after the Shiva, she's Jewish, or like it was 2 weeks ago now, someone brought up that her best friend had mentioned that she was on, she had very bad eyesight, that she was on a glaucoma medication that she had an adverse reaction to. And I felt like, wow, finally, I'm not the bad guy. You know, and my thought was, just because you're 93 years old, why should people assume, oh, she's going to die tomorrow? She was in perfect shape. She was a hugely vital person at 93. And when I hear the story that you're speaking about today, there are people, there are youth that want to kill themselves and should be able to kill themselves. And there are youth that also probably would regret it because it was an instantaneous, you know, and the development of the human brain and such. But there's a mix of ages and circumstances and such. I have many, many, many reasons to kill myself. I would never do it. I never would, you know, I don't have the courage to, and I don't have that peculiar kind of depression or whatever. And I would never, ever get any psychological help either. And I've got a lot of interest and a lot of drive and everything. But
Then do you have a question for the speakers?
yeah, I kind of have trouble with, you know, feeling like I'm the outcast here for supporting people's right to die, or at least some people's right to die. If they really want to die, you know, how do you know when your time is so short on this planet anyway? You know, I've been into Eastern mysticism a lot, and for me, like, I could die in an instant from an atomic bomb, you know, so I'm working to stop war, you know. But
Okay, Lynn, let's give a chance for some response to what you're saying about the right to die issue.
I totally hear what you are saying, Lynn. But for our project, we are about fiercely promoting this fact that suicide is preventable. And we don't want other young people to take their lives. So I appreciate you for sharing your thoughts with us.
And I would add that in working with people who have a terminal illness and they know that their life is going to be continuing to suffer, and they've lived a long life, and they go through the process of contacting their loved ones and saying goodbye. And there's a community that supports the person. It's a loving kind of ceremony to make that choice. That's very different than someone who's in pain and suffering and is not able to think clearly or make good decisions based on what's going on in their life. And if you don't mind me saying so, Tess and Honey, the movie, the documentary, the accounting and showing your background and the connection and the love that you've had in wanting to care for Olivia is so prominent, and there's no way that I can imagine Olivia feeling like her life needed to be over. There was no justification logically or emotionally that you can ever say, well, maybe she had a right to die. She had a right to live. And the double entendre of her name is just so poignant with how you're promoting this communication vehicle that, in your nonprofit. That's very cool.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Serena, Dawn? I don't want to pick
Well,
on
I
anybody.
just wanted to briefly say thank you for, it's hard to put this into words, but, you know, I come from a family that has not this issue, but other mental health issues. And I think one piece that overlaps for me is this internal to myself, and also just within the family culture, this desire to project to the outside world as if everything's normal, and kind of the just stigmatizing of mental illness, like that's just something we're going to not represent as part of our reality or as part of my personal reality. And I decided at some point it was just kind of a pain in the ass for me to put that forward in any but my most intimate relationships, and sometimes not even in them. And, you know, you can debate, there's all kinds of reasons for that, that maybe that is more functional in certain contexts, but it is also deeply dysfunctional because there's an erasure there of a significant part of my own experience, significant relationships in my life that get kind of just eliminated from view or kind of whitewashed somehow. So I just want to say thank you for having enough like love for your sister and your daughter, and also enough love for yourselves to just show up in all of it and to share that with others. I think it's potentially liberating to see that witness in my life and in others' lives.
Thank you for sharing that, Serena.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I want to thank you also. I have a brother who tried to kill himself and did not succeed, and he now has brain damage. But I think especially with young people, I don't think they have the big picture. You know, I think making a decision to kill yourself at that age, you really are lacking in perspective. And I think it's usually a tragedy. So I think the work you're doing is very important, and it must not be easy for you. I'm glad you're doing it though.
Thank you. And you bring up a good point, is that, you know, young people's brains are not fully developed until they're about 25 years old. So they are more impulsive, and it's a dangerous time if someone's unstable. So that's
Yeah, and that's something that we're addressing in the third act of the film in some conversations I'm having with psychiatrists. Just like what is happening in your brain at that time, and how young people are more impulsive. Yeah, I think you bring up a very good point. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing about your brother.
Yeah.
My recollection is the last part of the brain that develop is the prefrontal cortex, which is the equipment we need to predict the future, to foresee, to make plans. So often you step on the gas pedal, but you forget there's a curve in the road coming up ahead because your brain doesn't have that capacity to put the two and two together. So I agree with Don, your point is well taken, that how often our adults with full capacity brains still don't make good decisions. And if we're using limited equipment or equipment that's not fully developed, I don't think young people have the capacity to make those big decisions. College is one of those places in society where it's okay not to know who you are or have it all figured out yet. And it emphasizes so much, your film emphasizes so much the need to have support on campus and to have some kind of acceptable way for kids to know that they can reach out. Oftentimes that rebelliousness just carries into college, and that's where the drinking and provocative activities and sex and trying to test the limits of how far you can go is part of that culture.
Right. I've put a resource into the chat called the JED Foundation. And the JED Foundation is awesome. They empower teens and young adults with skills to support them in that in-between area of, high school and into college, or high school into whatever the young person's journey is. But they're a really great resource for kids, and they have some really awesome programs.
That's
Because
great.
I think you're right, Barry, that age is so, I know for Liv, she was like, okay, I'm living on my own now. I have to have it all together. When really, do any of us have it all together? And I would say those things to her, but, that front part of her brain wasn't formed yet. So she couldn't fully believe or see that.
Especially under the influence, and dealing with whatever was happening just in that very moment.
I want to throw another question out about her creativity, because you mentioned that as a performer. I know a little bit about that as a musician. There's kind of this thing when you're on stage where you're seeking a response, but sometimes you can't handle the response, even if it's a positive response. So I wonder if either of you remember Olivia getting an applause at the end of a performance, and whether you think she was able to take that in or what that meant to her. Has she ever talked about that with you?
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, like whenever she would be in a performance, first of all, she just shined, like everyone would be like, oh my gosh, she just stood out in whatever performance she was in. And she would bask in the applause and the accolades immediately following. But then because of the way her brain was wired, she would kind of crash afterwards and kind of question, was I really that good? There was a little bit of insecurity that would start rearing its ugly head, where, I had hoped that she would remain in that glow of, being proud of what she had done. What do you think, Tessie?
I agree. And I think that's a really interesting question, Barry, because when I do rewatch the film, there is this moment where she comes out for the applause and is kind of like, okay, whoa. And so I think she could acknowledge it, but I don't know if she could fully take it in. Because that's when the thoughts of like, oh, well, I messed up this part. So, that's all people probably saw. And the insecurities that you're talking about, Mom, I think definitely would creep in often.
I can make up this hypothesis that performers and creative people have an especially big self-critic component. And that monster game that you were talking about, I hope there's a self-critic team in there, because it's not just one self-critic, but the musician friends that I have, even their jazz, I don't know if you know that jazz musicians make mistakes all the time, but they incorporate the mistakes if they're really good. So nobody knows it was a mistake. But when I talk to those people after the performance, they'll still say, man, I made a mistake. I can't believe I did that. And there's still that chatter that goes on to try to, because we all know that we could have done better, or we know all too well what we could fool some people, we can fool a lot of people, but that self-critic is with us all the time. And if we wear a facade, then you don't really show it. And some people show it really well, and we think they have problems. But we all have a management problem with that self-critic inside.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Tess and I can both say, yep, we're all of us. And I know that Liv struggled with that. I mean, Liv was also a visual artist too. And we have notebooks of hers where it's just like page after page has been ripped out, where she started creating something and it wasn't good enough. And, I think we can all attest to having those feelings.
Mhm.
But yeah,
I have a question. How early, I know you found very early with Liv that she had problems. How often does a general population, in particular of that age group that's more susceptible, diagnosed that early?
I don't know. Are there any mental health professionals who have a good idea about that? I mean, I know just as an educator perspective, I'm seeing in my younger students a lot of stress and anxiety. And in fact, the kids who played the game said, I think you should make a game for elementary school students because I wish I had something to talk about my feelings with in elementary school. But yeah.
Here's a deck of cards called My Ups and Downs for preschoolers. And this was done by a local therapist here years ago. So each card has not sure how to show it, has an emotion. And there's the negative cards are balanced with a positive card so that the kids can start to work with what they may be feeling and don't have words for it, but the pictures describe. There's one, for example, if the little kid is in the midst of the parents arguing, so they might pull that card and tell a story or make use of that kind of material. So I don't know about the other therapists here, but I think we can say that it happens at all ages. And adults who are traumatized will often remember the trauma from their early childhood. That's
What's the youngest age that children take their own life?
we have recently heard of 9 and 10-year-olds. And I don't know about the mental health providers who are here right now. What have you heard? But it's shocking. These are babies.
I don't work with kids and adolescents anymore. Chris or anyone else? Dawn, do you have any comments?
Well, I just know that it seems like it's becoming younger and younger. I was going to say 8 years old.
I don't know of anyone in my practice that has I thought about or attempted suicide at that age, but I do have several reports from teenagers I work with that they can trace back to first or second grade that they were either depressed or highly anxious, which is it's just so sad for various reasons. And your film shows that you can have a loving family and a huge group of loving friends and still be visited by this particular demon and have a rough fight on your hands, even from an early age. So, yeah, I don't think any age is too young to be aware and look for signs and symptoms. But yeah, I have heard stories of, I knew in first grade that I was depressed.
Good question, Lynn. Thanks for that. And there's a plug for child therapists, good child therapists who use play and puppets and the creative materials, and perhaps even role play and performance is included there too, to be able to know that there's a way to work with the feelings by being able to dramatize or through play act out different roles and scenarios.
I wonder if some people are more sensitive to like family arguments or environmental factors like expectations of what a lot of social media like was brought up in this case, or expectations of how good is good, the royal family, like comparative analyses that are going on in people's heads, that that person might be peculiarly sensitive to versus someone else, and how much of it is, environmental versus just a very sensitive person.
Mm. I mean, I know in terms of social media, what I've heard a lot from Susan, the therapist and advisor on the project, is that she is seeing a lot in her office this compare and despair notion of, you are seeing on your phone these things that you think you should be, but they are oftentimes not real. They're photoshopped, or people have full teams to make them look a certain way. And then, we're sitting at home saying, oh, why don't I look like that? Or why is my life not like this? And so there's this constant compare and despair. And I think for the younger generation, I mean, when I am hearing kids say, oh yeah, I got Instagram when I was in middle school, I can only imagine how that has affected them, because I got Instagram in college and it's done a number on me. And so I can only imagine with, these young developing minds, what social media does for them. And also bullying via social media now as well.
There's this tendency to be bragging on social media when something happens and you want to tell the world, but you don't necessarily see those other sides when people are feeling just regular and the self-critic or any of those other inner components that question who we are or doubt who we are come in. We have a few minutes left here before we need to close. Any other thoughts or comments from anyone who hasn't talked yet, who may be listening in or watching? What can we do, Tess and Honey, to support your project?
Sure. Well, you can visit our website, or you can visit our Instagram. We were just talking about Instagram at _live_project. We are a brand new nonprofit, so donations of any kind will always help us, as well as spreading the word about this film and about this game. The game is, you can pre-order it now. It should be available in April. Really excited about that. And continue having conversations with your loved ones and your family, and ask the hard questions and really listen.
Do you have enough funding for the expansion of your movie to turning it into a feature-length movie?
Yes, that's a whole separate ball game, but that is being covered, and now we're focusing on raising funds for continuing this project and funding other creative projects. We're working with a band here in Philadelphia to create a songwriting workshop based on the game that goes there. So that has been something very exciting for us and on the horizon.
Yeah, we're really excited about it, because we are a creative collaborative. We in being a nonprofit, is we are going to be producing these incredible tools to get people fearlessly communicating and having fun doing it. And any funds that we bring in go right back into designing and collaborating with other artists. And we also have some really exciting ideas on how to expand our website, and have creative outlets on the website, and invite artists to be part of our mission. And also, now that we're getting vaccinated, we're really looking forward to being able to travel with the film and speak publicly with communities, because I think that's so much more intimate than a Zoom call. So we're really, that's part of our continuing outreach. Yeah,
Very good.
It's
Very
very
good.
exciting.
Well, I'm going to make sure that we keep our interface webpage featuring this event up and continuing to be available. So if people Google and they find our webpage, we'll be able to refer them back to your webpage. And
Wonderful.
we'll also
Really
post
appreciate
this,
it.
we'll post this recording. I really appreciate, Tess, your comments after the film. I think that was extremely helpful to hear all that you've been learning and piecing it all together. So I'd like to make sure that that recording gets posted as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for having us and for this opportunity to share. And thank you everyone for watching.
Yeah, I echo that, and we're so honored. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And like Tess said earlier, you can reach us through our website and Tess at theliveproject.org or Honey at theliveproject.org. I welcome conversations with other parents who are looking for someone just to talk with. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your courage.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, everybody.
Thanks, Barry, for putting it together.